Mason, on the life science side, what do you see are the biggest challenges currently for biopharma, both on the clinical trial and the commercial world?
Sure. So Chris introduced me as the Vice President of Thought Leadership for IQVIA, which is a role that I play. I don't work for them full time. But I spend a lot of time in the C-suite. I probably met with 5 of the top 10 CEOs in the last 60 days to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a big deal for the industry. I don't really think that it's everybody's processed it yet, but it means that developing drugs is going to have to get faster, better, cheaper, because a lot of these drugs will not be developed in a world where pricing gets kind of beat up. Before that, I probably spent 90% of my time interpreting the launches in the last few years and how abysmal they've been. And so the talk that I've given about, what's the world look like post-COVID and what do launches look like in the United States. And I got to tell you, the data for 2020, 2021, 2022 would make me cry if I were a CEO. None of the launches have gone well other than a few treatments for COVID, vaccines for COVID, one decent drug in neuroscience, Kesimpta, was launched during this period, did pretty well. But others have been just woefully inadequate, like at 40 or 50% of expectations across the board. Right? A couple of exceptions to Tepezza, which is a drug for thyroid eye disease. But for the most part, anything that is pharmacy-based, meaning a prescription is being written, is just way off. Right? And the problem is that the system hasn't recovered from COVID. So the patients aren't getting to the doctor, the reps aren't getting to the doctor to talk about the drugs that are coming to the market. And so the whole patient flow model that's been in place for 40 years doesn't work anymore. And it was always kind of staggering because of the specialization of drugs where you used to go to talk to a doctor about statins or antidepressants, and 1 in every 3 patients they saw that week needed a prescription for a statin or an antidepressant or both, right? And now you treat patients with these rare neurological diseases or rare cardiac diseases, and you may not see a patient for 30 or 60 days who's an appropriate candidate, and the rep might have been in 90 days ago because you didn't want to see him. So the connection, the transmission between the doctor and the rep and the patient, that system is broken. And it's also true in clinical trials, right, which is you're trying to identify good candidates for clinical trials. The patients aren't flowing through at the same rate. When they flow through, you may not recognize them as being a good candidate for clinical trials. So clinical trials are way behind. They were way behind before COVID hit. After COVID hit, they've been way worse. And people don't realize this, but Ukraine and Russia were big sources of patients for clinical trials. That shut down. So to a company, go down the top 20 companies, every one of them is massively behind in enrollment. Right? So both, building your portfolio and getting it ready for launch, you're behind. And then once you get to market, you got a challenge. And one of the elegant things about the system that's being implemented by Viz is that doctors are being informed at the moment when a patient should be treated. And I call that the medical moment of truth, which is the patient flew by you, and you had to decide whether they had to be treated or not treated, and how they were going to be treated, whether that's with a drug or a procedure or nothing. And we miss most of those. And the AI and the patient flow of identifying the problem, getting it to the right doctor, getting the doctor the information, and to the extent that the doctor's interested, they can click a box and talk to a rep or a MSL or somebody from the company. This is what's been going on with Medtronic on the device side, but not on the pharmaceutical side. That's the future. I mean, they're a very precise use of technology that gets gets the doctor to understand what he's supposed to do, when, where, how. All of that happens in real time, as opposed to 18 months after the fact, which is how other people are using AI to identify patients for clinical trials or for treatment. You find a doctor who you think saw a lot of patients who had a condition, that should be, therefore, a good source of prescriptions to the future. How about right now? And so I find this really great. I mean, I think this is the next generation and actually a real use of AI as opposed to kind of doing something that wasn't so good faster.